Well, this is a very beautiful morning where we acknowledge that Kenya cannot stand in isolation. We must be able to connect with the globe. But when something does happen to our neighbors, to what extent does it affect our nation? This is the day where we look at the global conversations in as far as current affairs is concerned. You are watching KTN News. This is the Morning Prime. My name is Anki Doris Mbat. Just welcoming you all to join us on social media. KTN News across social media platforms. You can also find me at Doris Anki on X, Anki Doris Mbat on Facebook. We'll be looking at the Middle East war. What does this mean for Kenya? And also, 30 years on, Rwanda still thinking about and talking about the victims of the genocide. Are we giving enough attention to our relationships internationally as a country? Not forgetting the AUC chair position, the race is getting even hotter. What do we expect? Is it a budget issue? Is it that we have a threat, a candidate for that matter, from Djibouti? But how will East Africa even vote? All these conversations on the table this morning with very key voices relevant to this conversation this morning. Do not forget to talk to us on social media. Give us your thoughts and your expectations. Let's start this particular show with the dailies. Of course, on the screen is our own production. That is the Standard. School fee matters education taking center stage while members of parliament oppose e-citizen way. New hurdle, they term it. President Ruto's plan to have school fees channeled through a single e-citizen pay bill number, a move already suspended by court, suffered a second blow after members of parliament appeared to reject it, saying it would disrupt school finances. More of that on page 4, but also indulge with us on the same. At the top of this paper, it's quickly to rush through. Kibunjia, others charged in ghost worker scandal. This story continues to develop into today. You'll find more of that development on page 5 of the Standard. Members of Parliament reject Ruto's envoy pick for DRC. On the national page 11, on the national page 11 of the Standard, you'll get more details of that. And also the panelists will get to, throw in their perspectives on this matter. Members of Parliament now rejecting Ruto's envoy pick for DRC. Why wage bill keeps going up on the business page 18 in as far as the economy and your pockets are concerned. It matters as sports page 32 on the Standard has that covered, and Arsenal's tough test in Munich, very important. Now, Mukuni, Moigal, stop in drama, and of course that's beautiful to read in as far as entertainment and education is concerned on page 3. But let's look at the main image now captured on the front page of the Standard this morning. No end in sight. Doctors press on with protests. In as far as the health is concerned in the country, no end in sight. Doctors press on with the protests. But let's see the voice of the COG, that is the chairperson of the Council of Governors, Anne Waiguru. Just if you follow closely with the images on the front page, she says, if the national government agrees to implementation of Dr. CBA, it would have a ripple effect on civil servants' basic salary and will require additional allocation of resources to be able to carry out this task. But in that image is a protester with a banner demanding that the government hits the medics' demands. All right, what do you think of these headlines? Let us know at KT News across board, but also on the national page 8 at the edge of the paper on the same Standard newspaper, blow as court holds Mombasa Road works. But essentially, we're looking at matters education taking center stage and matters health on the Standard. Let's take a look at another key paper this morning. Remember, we are just looking at the paper review, we're looking at the Standard, and now we want to look at the Daily Nation and give you what you expect across the day. And that is what the dailies give you essentially. But on the Daily Nation this morning, coming to your screen shortly, politics of term limits. That is, of course, or that is an old headline, but let's take a look at the Daily Nation. How police officers used car in his custody to obtain loan on page 3, but also in the main story you're seeing there, as we're looking at the Daily Nation, we're just giving you those headlines shortly. What we're looking at right now is ping pong as a death spike. Ping pong as a death spikes is what's happening on the Daily Nation's front page. And haki kwa daktari Mkenya, lipa kama CS, lipa kama deni. That is some of the placards we're seeing carried on the Daily Nation's front page. But also you can see a similarity from the Standard and the Daily Nation, where the COG has been represented in as far as them weighing in on this doctor strike is concerned. The voice of Anne Waiguru is being seen also covered here on the Daily Nation. But what now they're terming as ping pong as a death, of course, spike. The question is, how long are we going to be having this particular, protests ongoing? And the government is still trying to sit down with the doctors and find a lasting solution. And the COG says in the event that the national government agrees to implement the CBA, this will have a ripple effect on all civil servants' basic pay, quite similar to what is highlighted on the Standard this morning. But that is it. That is the main story this morning on the Daily Nation. Grab a copy for more details. Let's just look at another paper this morning, including the People Daily and the Business Daily. But on the People Daily this morning, matters education also on the front page. TSC on the spot, over 149 billion shillings insurance cover. TSC on the spot, over 149 billion shillings insurance cover, what they term as a fraud scheme. City lawyer reveals how Minet Insurance Brokers Kenya Limited illegitimately transformed itself into an underwriter, thereby denying teachers full value of the multi-billion shilling contract. That is what is now taking center stage, and you can see there that TSC is on the spot. But Atwoli also fights back in remittances row, remember, in as far as Kotu is concerned. 19 held after 290 million shillings equity bank fraud is also highlighted on the People Daily. On page 3, more details has it that detectives plan to make recoveries before suspects are formally charged in court. We follow up with that as well for accountability reasons. But on matters health, on the newsbeat, page 5 of the People Daily, SAC CS Nakumincha demand women members of Parliament. Conversations that have been going on for quite some time, including the matters or competence questions around CS Nakumincha. And now the headline, SAC CS Nakumincha demand women members of Parliament, is highlighted on the front page of the People Daily. And lawmakers accuse embattled Health Cabinet Secretary of incompetence in handling of ongoing strike by doctors. Those are some of the main stories this morning as highlighted on this particular People Daily newspaper. Grab a copy when you wake up, but as you can see, essentially and vividly, matters education have taken it to the front page of the People Daily and the Standard. Let's take a look at Taifa Leo. For those who follow closely news in Kiswahili, Taifa Leo has equally brought in a very interesting headline this morning saying mgomo, mochari zimefurika. Mochari zimefurika, mgomo. And speaking of the death spike so far, and now in Kiswahili wanasema huzuni, uchunguzi wetu wabaini kuwa idadi ya mili katika mochari imeongezeka maradufu. Familia zasimulia jinsi wapendwa wao walivyokufa kutokana na mgomo uliopo. It is a very, very unfortunate turn of events, and of course they are saying it's a very somber mood. Uchunguzi wetu wabaini kuwa idadi ya mili katika mochari imeongezeka maradufu, which means Kenyans are continually losing their lives. But what is the end game of the protest will be, of course, involving the panelists to just give a word or two on some of these current affairs issues. If we have the Business Daily, we'll quickly look at that, but that is the version, and you can see that the doctor strike is taking center stage even on the front page of Taifa Leo. What is the situation back at home, directly from where you're watching us from? Please do share your personal experiences in as far as the protests are concerned. Let's close this with the Business Daily. Take a look at what the economy is like this morning. And 500 wealthy Kenyans fall off dollar millionaires list. 500 wealthy Kenyans fall off the dollar millionaires of course, list. Remember, the shilling has been gaining strength against the dollar gradually. Could this be an effect on this particular niche is a question, and we're looking at about 7,200, quite a number of that particular development. So state also puts up 2 billion shilling stake in iconic Hilton Hotel for sale. A number of things are developing, including KRA and the tax, avoiding multinationals, also covered on the Business Daily. NSE investor wealth shrinks, as you can follow closely with me on that. And the doctor strike has equally been highlighted on the Business Daily. Shows you essentially how serious and vital this issue is. And doctors start second month of boycott. Second month of the boycott. Let us know your thoughts on the same, but that's pretty much what it looks like this morning on the front pages of each daily. The Standard, the Daily Nation, of course, Taifa Leo, Business Daily. Besides just bringing in the economic perspective, they have highlighted the plight of the medical fraternity in the country. At KTN News across all social media platforms, we also want to cross over into the stories that, of course, made it to the headlines from the news desk. And quickly, just a recap of each of those. 5 former top officials of the National Museums of Kenya, including ex-managing director Dr. Mzalendo Kibunjia, were yesterday arraigned before a Nairobi court over alleged embezzlement of 441 million shillings. The 5 are accused of the offense allegedly committed during the financial years 2015, 2016, and also 2021 and 2022. The suspects were released on a cash bail of 5 million shillings each, or bond of 10 million shillings. And in another case, embattled former Murang'a Governor Mwangi wa Iria engaged his legal team to negotiate with the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission to delay his appearance to, of course, the courts today. The advocate's request to push the date to Wednesday was granted by EACC. Here's Ode Francis with the details.
It has been a busy day for the EACC detectives as their date with Mzalendo Kibunjia, Stanvas Ogalo, Oliver Rabuor, Wycliffe Ongata, and Oscar Mwaura faced 10 counts at the Milimani Anti-Corruption Court to answer to charges including conspiracy to commit a corruption offense and embezzlement of 441.3 million shillings public funds.
I have carefully considered the submissions made by the prosecution and the defense in relation to the bond terms, and I hereby make the following orders. Now, each accused person may be released on a cash bail of Kenya shillings 5 million or a bond of Kenya shillings 10 million, one surety like amount.
The monies were allegedly fraudulently paid as salaries and gratuity to persons purportedly employed by the National Museum of Kenya. The suspects pleaded not guilty. Financial investigations reveal that the National Museum of Kenya, with 1,282 employees, allegedly had 105 ghost workers. The said ghost workers were employed between June 2016 and June 2022. During this period, they received a sum of 491 million shillings. The ghost workers were allegedly placed in a grade NM6 under a 3-year renewable contract. Their average net income was 72,000 shillings per month. Their financial transactions tell a different story. They consistently transferred amount ranging from 60,000 to 63,000 shillings each month, directly or indirectly, to National Museum of Kenya officials. Financial flowchart allegedly shows that Wycliffe Ongata received more than 40 million shillings from the ghost workers, deposited a total of 163 million shillings into his M-Pesa account. Mzalendo Kibunjia, who was the then National Museum of Kenya boss, allegedly deposited a substantial amount of millions into his M-Pesa account. He received the money from Wycliffe Odhiambo. Oliver Okinyi Rabor is alleged to have received a significant sum of money from the ghost workers. He then deposited it into his M-Pesa account. Evidence of Stanvas Ogalo M-Pesa transaction were also revealed between Oliver Okinyi and from Wycliffe Odhiambo. Furthermore, it's alleged that the ghost workers and the National Museum of Kenya officials colluded to create false documents, which were then used to secure loans. In another story, former Murang'a Governor Mwangi wa Iria successfully managed to delay his appearance before the Anti-Graft Commission from Tuesday to Wednesday at 8 a.m.
We have agreed that he comes tomorrow. And then he was coming by invitation. He was not under arrest, there was no summon, and there was no warrant.
While speaking to the media, Eugene Wamalwa urged the EACC detectives to practice decorum while arresting high-profile officials.
We would like to see more courtesy in terms of handling these matters, and would like to see that in future there is no need for harassment or embarrassment or intimidation of the leaders when there are matters such as this. Just an invite or summons to a particular place at a given time will do.
Ode Francis, KTN News, Nairobi.
And now on matters Health Cabinet Secretary Susan Nakumincha is asking medics to abandon their strike and return to the negotiating table. The CS says the government is committed to end the health impasse that has seen paralysis in the health sector. Nakumincha, while speaking in Kajiado County yesterday, expressed hope that the stalemate would end this week. But as Husna Mohammed now reports, medics remained adamant in their demands yesterday, holding peaceful protests around the city of Nairobi.
34 days and still going. Unhappy medics held peaceful march on the streets of Nairobi, defying Inspector General of Police Japheth Koome, who had outlawed the protest. The doctors maintained their hard stance of not going back to work if the demands are not met by the government.
They are on the streets because there's a swelling disillusionment in the hospitals. That when they go there, their work only is to confirm that a patient has died. And this is happening because there's a big shortage of doctors, there's a big shortage of health workers across the country.
The striking medics accused the government of failing to listen to their demands. They claimed that the government had run away from the negotiating table.
It is not right that you demand for allocation of funds to the counties to build hospitals, to get kickbacks, but you have no regard to the healthcare workers who offer services in those facilities.
Just today, the health CS, Susan Nakumincha, was speaking in Kajiado County, asked the striking doctors to return to the table. She said the government was ready to listen to them.
I want to ask of them that the government has extended an olive branch. The government has given them an offer. It is up to them to come to the table and we discuss their counter offer.
Earlier, the Council of Governors Chairperson Anne Waiguru implored upon medics to end their strike, saying the demands are unrealistic and could dent the economy if implemented.
This would have a ripple effect on all civil servants' basic pay and will therefore require additional allocation of resources to county governments to be able to carry out this task.
Meanwhile, unposted medical interns have dismissed what the government is offering them. They say the 70,000 Kenya shillings before tax is too little.
They work more than 100 hours a week and they are not paid, yet the patients pay money for the services. We are also demanding that they are paid, they are remunerated.
Contrary to expectations, today's medics protest march was peaceful and without incident. The Inspector General of Police Japheth Koome had said the march was illegal, but following his announcement, a section of civil society groups, including Kenya Human Rights Commission, have now sued the Inspector General over his statement terming his declaration illegal and unconstitutional.
April 16th marks day 34 of the doctors' nationwide strike, day 16 of the clinical officers, and day 15th of the medical laboratory officers. As usual, when two elephants fight, is the grass that suffers. Kenyans continue to struggle and be deprived of essential services. Husna Mohammed, KTN News, Nairobi.
Meanwhile, President William Ruto is expected to open the new Bunge Towers this Friday, 14 years since the works began on the ultra-modern facility. The building, whose opening has been postponed multiple times, has been at the center of controversy, with its total construction cost moving up from 2 billion shillings to the current 9.26 billion shillings. And as KTN's political affairs reporter Emmanuel To now explains, the building sits on land that has no title deed, according to revelations by a parliamentary committee.
Bunge Tower, a 28-story plush building whose construction began in 2010 is now nearing completion. Tuesday, the precincts of Parliament were a beehive of activities as the contractor carried out final touches on Bunge Tower ahead of its grand opening on Friday by President William Ruto. The legislators will access the building from the main Parliament building's entrance opposite County Hall and will then enter a tunnel near the staff canteen through to basement 2 of Bunge Tower.
As members of Parliament, we feel that we have now a conducive environment to serve our people. Remember that when we are here, members deal with issues of legislation, oversight and representation. Sometimes we don't have adequate offices.
The tunnel beneath the section of Nairobi's Harambee Avenue, constructed at a cost of over 100 million shillings, is 120 meters long and 5 meters wide and has 24-hour CCTV security and lighting. The 125-meter high complex includes 4 parking levels, a reception area, 24 committee rooms, 338 offices for MPs, a health club, a restaurant, an open garden and a service floor.
Unajua ile shida kubwa tulikuwa nayo ni kuwa komiti unapata ziko kwa maeneo tofauti. Iko Parliament building, mara iko KICC, iko Red Cross, iko upande, different areas. Lakini kwa hii sasa tunaona itakuwa ni vizuri hatutakuwa labda tukichelewa kwa mikutano.
The allocation of the rooms was free, was fair, was credible because it was through balloting. And so that sometimes, sometimes there is what you call discrimination here. But this time round, first-time members of Parliament and even those who have served ranking members, we've had equal opportunity to get offices.
And after more than a decade of construction, members of Parliament have already started moving into the new ultra-modern facility, with the Speaker Moses Wetangula saying it will be done in 2 phases. The first phase will see members relocating from the Kenyatta International Convention Center to the tower or to alternative accommodations, and phase 2, set to begin on July 1st, will involve MPs from Continental House. However, questions have arisen over the huge costs.
Why would the government use 9 billion to build offices? How many jobs could be created with that 9 billion Kenya shillings? Because that building should cost 2 billion Kenya shillings.
Apart from the longer period taken compared to the original period of less than 5 years, questions have also been raised by legislators over the land's title deed. 14 years on and the construction of Bunge Tower is nearly complete, with President William Ruto expected here on Friday to officially launch it and hand it over to Parliament, with members of Parliament from the Senate and the National Assembly expected to occupy it. But more questions abound as to how the amount of construction rose from 5 billion shillings to 9 billion shillings in just 14 years. Emmanuel To, KTN News, Parliament Buildings, Nairobi.
Well, thank you very much, Emmanuel To. But also, Prime Cabinet Secretary, Musalia Mudavadi, says there is urgent need to speed up action to end the conflict in Sudan. Mudavadi termed the cost of violence in human terms and in the loss of opportunities for Sudan, particularly for children, as unacceptable. Mudavadi, while speaking in Paris, France, during a ministerial meeting on Sudan Peace Initiative, said Africa needs African solutions. He said both Intergovernmental Authority on Development and the African Union should be involved in any international processes seeking to address the situation in Sudan.
Has been host to refugees in 2 camps, Kakuma and Dadaab, for years. It has taken decades for recovery, and it has been at a great sacrifice to the people of Kenya to be able to support their brothers and sisters who have faced conflict. Therefore, what is happening in Sudan, ladies and gentlemen, needs extreme attention, because the new people, the young people, the ones who are displaced, will need support. The host communities will need support. They're going to carry a burden of supporting humanity for many years to come. Equally, it is important that the intervention is stepped up, and I'm happy to recognize that the word sanctions is now coming up in this room.
All right. right, it is all about the globe today, and Sudan is not very far off from where we are. Remember, Kenya has always been on the forefront, trying her level best to ensure that her neighbors are living in peace, simply because there is a trickle effect when there's conflict in the neighboring countries that will then be felt in this country. I want to appreciate the guests in studio, so maybe we can hear their words on this matter. We appreciate you and honor you for, of course, creating time to be here to speak with the Kenyans this morning. Dr. Nelson M. Sechere, who is an executive director, Kenya Veterans for Peace, but you've also been very key in AU, in as far as Kenya as a country is concerned. Welcome to the show. What are your opening remarks? And of course, just your comments on Sudan conflicts this far.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for welcoming me for this program. Having been in Africa Union for about maybe 10 years, I can relate to the issues of Sudan. My only disappointment is that we are discussing the Sudan solution from France. It could be done in Nairobi or South Africa. It should be a solution from Africa, like the PCC say. I think it is important that we now have to enhance our systems. Solving African problem from Europe, to me, doesn't give us enough to do. And African Union is very keen on the conflict regions, the North and the Sudan. Yeah. So, in my opinion, the minister, the cabinet secretary is very much in order to say this is a solution that is required to be formulated from home and not from other quarters.
I know we'll come back to that in more details, and I do not know if your other fellow panelists agrees, because that statement, and of course we've also seen our president and many other African presidents travel across the globe. So you're saying solutions that pertain Africa should come from Africa, done in Africa. But let's hear from Professor Peter Kagwanja, diplomacy and foreign relations expert. What are your opening remarks? Do you agree with the sentiments this morning? And what are your thoughts on the Sudan conflict?
Basically, Sudan is a very sad affair because it comprises of layers of conflicts that have been going on cumulatively. If you remember, it all started with food protests that ended up with the removal of the former president Omar al-Bashir by the military. And then from the military, then we see the formation of transitional government. And the formation of the transitional government, which comprises the military and civilians, led by Abdallah Hamdok. Then the military carries a coup against Hamdok. And again, protest intensifies. And finally, the military itself split up between the two arms, the militias and the military itself. And now what we are seeing is basically a multi-layered civil war in Sudan. Why the world has become concerned is largely because the issue is evolving to become a very disastrous humanitarian crisis. And this has always been the case. I am one of the supporters of African solutions to African problems, which is basically the mantra that drives the African Union. It is the African solutions to African problems which give rise to what we have today as the peace and security architecture of the African Union. But the problem here is that Sudan has rendered itself to multiple interventions. There is the intervention by IGAD. There is the intervention by the African Union. There is the intervention by Saudi Arabia and allied countries there. And there is also intervention by Egypt and its allies. And now we have the international front led by France, which is taking the form of funding, raising money for the humanitarian crisis in the country. The problem here is that when there are so many cooks, the broth can't cook.
So it
well.
works to their disadvantage?
It works to the disadvantage of Sudan, works to the disadvantage of Africa, and works to the disadvantage of the citizens of Sudan themselves. Yes, it is true, there is a serious humanitarian crisis, but I think every intervener is driven by their interests rather than the interest of Sudan itself. And that's why we need to get back to the drawing board. The African Union need to put its act together.
Okay.
And they need to be a little bit more assertive. It need to take proactive action. But the problem, we have a chairman of the African Union Commission who is too much of what you call a francophonie. Yes. He's too francophonie to the point that he thinks it's still part of the French Commonwealth. At a time when France is on the receiving end. Take from Senegal, the concluded election, which has made a pronouncement about breaking away from the Commonwealth. The coups in Niger, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Guinea, all are anti-French. Why? Because French neocolonialism is so brutal, so oppressive, so exploitative that even the African Union silence itself is immoral. So in this particular case, it is actually leading to the end of ECOWAS. ECOWAS is now has moved from one of the strongest regional economic communities to one of the most of the weakest, and one must say most divided. So what that means is, as we get to Sudan, the African Union need to put its act together.
All right. And saying that there are certain authorities and voices that need to do a little bit more. Let's hear from Professor Macharia Munene, who is a foreign affairs expert. And I know that you just walked in when, we were giving our opening remarks. Let's hear your thoughts on the Sudan conflict, because, the Prime Cabinet Secretary, Musalia Mudavadi, has said it is time that we move with speed, but give African solutions to African problems.
Well, thank you. Sudan is a tragedy compounded by another tragedy. So it's difficult to decipher. And the Honorable Prime Minister, or Prime Cabinet Secretary,
yes,
they're the same thing. He's also Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Right.
So he speaks for Kenya and what Kenya stands for or should stand for. And it's true that the problem in Sudan needs to be sorted out. The question is, who is to do it and how is it to be done? And the people doing it, are they acceptable to the parties in the conflict? I think one of the problems is that the parties to the conflict may not be interested in those who are trying to help. I think there is something wrong with the people trying to help, because they are considered to be partisan, and so something like that. So Sudan itself is a complex matter.
Yes.
There is a lot of killing. It's chaotic, and even when it looks calm, it's still chaotic. The things that are not working there very well. There's very little clarity as to who is in charge of what, or who is supposed to be doing what. It's a big country. It used to be very big. It's still big. And with a lot of factions, regions that appear like as if they are different countries. When you're in Darfur, it's not the same thing as when you're in Nubia. Or things like that. So those things need to be sorted out properly. But the question is, who is to do the sorting?
Now, speaking of who is to do the sorting, Kenya has boasted, for being a very critical country as far as restoring peace, or at least being in the peacemaking process. Acceptability at this point, do you think Kenya is an acceptable party to pinpoint to start with? Because we are trying to be helpful to the neighbors, but is it welcome? Is it necessary? What is your thoughts?
Well, Kenya has a problem of acceptability. I think we started on a wrong footing. The officials have been too quick to make comments they should not be making when things happen. So when the opportunity comes, it raises questions. Very unfortunately, President Ruto has been identified as being very partisan in that issue. accused of hobnobbing with one faction, and the other one is not amused. So when the IGAD tried to propose him as the IGAD mediator, the Boran, the guy sitting, officially sitting in Khartoum, said no. Why? He says, you are partisan, because you have been, so how can we trust you? And that has been a problem, not just in Sudan. It's a Kenyan problem of being too quick to make comments of things that should not be commented on. At the time, we were very quick to make comments in the Sahel, and turned out it was a mistake. We commented on Gaza.
That too?
Yeah, we did.
You felt that was too quick?
Yeah, it was too quick.
Okay.
You know, when the thing started, even recently on the Iran thing.
Israel.
Yeah, the Israel-Iran thing. It gives a very negative impression of being too quick, and then seemingly to follow the lead of somebody called Joe Biden. That when the US and the West say something, it looks as if you are ready to join in and say something similar. So the image is then not very good, especially when you have a very emotive issues which are divisive to the continent. So we have that problem.
All right. Yeah. Let me hear from Sechere, because it's very important to understand. I want us to cross over to the Iran-Israel conflict, the Middle East, and what this means to Kenyans. Because what Professor here is saying is that he, in his observation, sees that Kenya is too quick to make certain comments that we don't paint us in a very good picture. What are your thoughts on saying, because the president, because as we transition into the Iran-Israel war, gave a statement when this conflict, sparred. Do you think that in as far as that is concerned, it was equally quick for Kenya to speak?
Yes, I think it was quick. Peace process requires a lot of diplomacy, and I'm sure my colleagues will agree. Any process of peace, including even our own, the one for bombers. You remember there was a time
the NADCO.
Yes, the NADCO committee.
Okay.
There was a time when the committee is discussing, but out here the politicians are uttering words, seemingly indicating that whatever they're going in the process is null and void. Peace process requires a lot of patience and a lot of sacrifice. Not speaking sometimes is a good solution. Taking time before you respond to something, because you may comment on something before the real thing happens, and this is attributed highly to the fact that we are seen to be a peaceful nation generally in the region. So I think we take advantage of that position as Kenya. Of course, it's a plus for us because we don't have very dire cases of civil unrest, apart from these other things that we're having today. Speaking of the president giving a comment before the systems of Sudan, like Professor said, there's something that is very key. If you are discussing war, or rather peace, and you already have a side that you've taken, the other side will not even understand what you're saying because you seem to be partisan already. You have a direction you've taken, you have a decision. So, and therefore it requires getting a neutral person. But who is the person? Like Professor is asking, who is the person who can be the neutral one? Because at some point you'll be inclined to one direction.
Are you then saying that because we don't want to be pessimistic, but there should be some light at the end of the tunnel. But is it possible to get the neutrality? In fact, the other day, Musalia Mudavadi was just acknowledging what Kofi Annan did for Kenya in 2007, 2008. But that neutrality, in as far as Sudan conflict is concerned, who do you think? You know, having sat in the AU and worked with the AU.
In my opinion, the African Union should have taken the center stage as the organ that is uniting all African countries. And taking center stage, we have the UN Security Council. We have different mechanisms of solving problems without having to have inter-country to country, because African Union covers all African countries. And its mandate, one of its mandate is to provide peace to citizens of Africa. That is one of its core objectives. In fact, they have a whole commission for security and peace and security, which would have taken that mandate. They could send envoys, experts in different ways before having a political statement. Because political statements, sometimes they are not thought through before they are spoken. Sometimes it's an afterthought. Oh, I wish I didn't say this, but it's already on record. In my opinion, I think AU should have given a better approach for getting peace than having a specific, okay, IGAD has their own responsibility. By picking Kenya to be a representative, it is okay. But AU has the larger mandate. I think it is about AU to make that decision. Because if Sudan collapses today, there is no glory for African Union, even the chair. There is no glory for any of the African Union. If Sudan becomes a failed state, we won't blame only Sudan. We'll blame the what is AU doing about it? So that is my opinion.
Professor Peter, because it's not like Sudan conflict started the other day. Yeah, year in, year out, the division came in, and you know, we have it resurfacing just the other day, last year, thereabout. So at this point in time, the African Union is following closely as well. You just mentioned that the sitting AUC, you know, chair doesn't seem to be doing, you know, enough or looking at it differently. What would be your expectations then of the AUC and of the African Union? Because if you're saying they're not doing enough, what then is expected from your expertise that you would see done at this point?
I like the statement you have made about the Sudan problem being protracted. It's one of the most protracted conflicts on the continent, almost equal to Congo. But to Sudan is more lethal, has been more fatal in terms of deaths and so on. The problem we have is that we look at Sudan in a very historical way, to the point that we forget that even the split of the Sudan that we talked about, from Africa's largest country to what it is today, is a continuation of what we're calling the Sudanese civil war. And the civil war would start in the 50s, come to the 1970s, it's a climax. Then the so-called Anyanya 1 and Anyanya 2. And then obviously we now have the referendum, and South Sudan is born. South Sudan continues with its own civil war in the south, and the north continues with its own civil war in Darfur. And the Darfur conflict was one of the most fatal, which gave rise to the current combatant in this current conflict, Mohamed Dagalo, otherwise called Hemedit. Hemedit is a creature of the war in Darfur. Because the president of the time, Omar al-Bashir, could not deal with that particular problem using conventional military. And therefore, he used militias, the Janjaweeds, which now have evolved into a second arm of the government. And the civil war is now between the Janjaweeds and the former military. And the Janjaweeds is stronger because it occupies a region that's richer in terms of wealth, gold and so on. It also occupies a neighborhood that is battle-hardened. Chad is in the neighborhood, Central African Republic, and so on. Now, coming to the African mandate.
Right.
Now, with this kind of a background and deep understanding, which only the African Union can keep track of and should keep track of, because it is the only one which has an instrument of early warning. It is the only one that has a commission dedicated to solving problems on the continent, including Council of the Wise, that can be sent in to deal with this issue. The African Union Commission can fall back on various mechanisms within the continent and resolve the issue. And within Sudan, that is where the concept of hybrid peacekeeping was born. Hybrid here meaning the United Nations working in tandem with the African Union. But now the African Union is dropping the ball. Why? I argue because the current chair of the African Union Commission specifically is basically born out of this place. He's Chadian, he's French in his orientation, and he's largely feeling like this the battleground in his own home. Why African peace process should be discussed in France at this juncture is what really defeats me. At this particular time, it's a bad timing, showing that the African Union is not, it is not really on the ball.
It's not in charge.
It is not in charge in this matter. Fine, Secretary, I think because of its inaction in regard to the Ethiopian civil war in Tigray, where it just stood by and watched, and the headquarters is in the capital of the country that is in a civil war. Basically, that tarnished its name. So the African Union needs to be refurbished.
All right.
It needs to be revamped in a manner that it is going to implement its own mandate. The mandate spelled out in the African Union Peace and Security Protocol, or the protocol establishing the Peace and Security Council, is important. Kenya is in that Security Council.
All right.
And Kenya itself is yo-yoing. It is involved in a yo-yo game and is supposed to be leading the process. In the Sudan, apart from the statements that the Cabinet Secretary is making for Foreign Affairs, who is also our Prime Cabinet Minister, Kenya basically also need to know that it is the country in charge of this region as far as matters peace and development are concerned. And the IGAD is the sharpest instrument that Kenya has used in the past to intervene in the Sudan, South Sudan, in Somalia, and else. So what is the big issue here? Kenya need to go back to the drawing board and make its own foreign policy consistent. It's not about credible. We are becoming profiteers rather than, solvers of problems. Our impartiality is in question across the board, not only in Sudan.
Okay.
Across the board, our impartiality is, even in Congo, our impartiality is being questioned. And we now want to export our bad manners to the African Union by basically seeking to control the African Union Commission. And you can see the styles in which we are getting this. We're not doing it in a dignified manner, like a country that has its policy together.
You're saying we're not doing it in a dignified manner?
Yes, because you start by basically jumping in front of the road, and then when other candidates, for example, the African Union, start coming up, now you don't know what to do. Because it appeared to every Kenyans who are not familiar with foreign policy and the African politics that the Kenyans are the people who are now in the lead. No, we are not.
Let me hear from Professor Mashara before I take a very short breather. There are some very interesting observations that have been, put forth, and I don't know what your thoughts are, because even as we're looking at the papers, members of Parliament have rejected Ruto's envoy pick for DRC. I don't know. Is it true what Professor Kagwanja is putting across?
Professor Kagwanja has a habit of being right.
Okay.
No, it is true. Kenya has a very bad image and pushy, said to be pushy in the wrong direction. We have violated principles. The Kenyan position on the Sahrawi question is not very admirable. And so if you cannot uphold a basic principle like that one, the reason for negating on it, whether there were some appropriate inducements or discussions, we know that Morocco and the US and France are usually very close on this one. And so for Kenya to jump into that camp on the Sahrawi question is damaging to the image. It has no position. No position at all. And that is well known continentally. That's when it goes someplace to say we are helping, people look at Kenya and say, and who are you? What are you coming to do? Okay? Now, let me comment about the issue of neutrality.
Yes.
In a mediator does not necessarily have to be neutral.
Okay.
No. Because to say you are neutral is to say you really have no feelings of any kind, one way or the other. The critical issue here is not neutrality. It is credibility.
All right.
Are you credible? Can you be trusted to be impartial? To accept, yes, you have biases. We are all biased. No, let's not pretend. We are all biased. And everyone should know the biases. But the main thing is, can you be trusted to be fair? And that's where we have a problem that other countries, forces, may have a problem trusting Kenyans to be fair. Although previously, we have done a pretty good job, previously. South Sudan's independence is largely a Kenyan affair. It's not that we didn't have feelings one way or the other, but for some reason, we were able to cultivate that image of being fair and being credible. And so we could talk to both the South Sudanese and to the people in Khartoum. And they say, okay, we can see sense. Of course, if you are not able to show that you are credible, that you can be fair, despite your biases, then you have a problem. What we have in Africa, not just here, but all over the world, is that the credibility of policymakers is down the tube. And since the credibility is down the tube, then you don't make progress. You keep on being accused of, is it double or triple standards, or what was that? You say one
double
thing.
speak.
So there is that problem. So the Sudan issue, as has been said, it's not a new thing. Sudan is one of those countries that suffered multiple colonialism. And because of that, the simmering issues that were there at the time of independence in 1956. And then they had a problem of trying to create a nation out of that multiple colonial situation, and it has not worked very well. So is it possible to find a force that is credible and both sides will listen because it is credible?
All right.
That's what we are struggling with.
All right, that is where the struggle is at. It's always good to follow and understand with the experts where they think the loophole could be. Because at the end of the day, people around the globe will have an effect if there's conflict in some part of the globe. We want to take a very short breather, but when we come back, what is the role of the African Union? Why is it even in existence? What should be tightened? Remember, Kenya is coming out, not just East Africa, but Kenya in particular, is coming out strongly even after the former Prime Minister, Raila Odinga, declared his bid to run for